How do you paint a watercolor sky? There are two ways I know of. One is wet in wet, and the other is wet on dry. In this lesson, we're doing wet in wet, and we're doing this painting. Here it comes. Whoops. Ta-da! So we're literally painting this picture. So it's a very simple scene, and it's simple, but wet in wet is one of the most difficult techniques in watercolor painting. And why should we learn it? Because it looks magical. It really looks beautiful. That's why we should do wet in wet. So the important point is you have to control the amount of water on your brush. That's critical. So you do that in two ways. Well, basically you have to use your rag. You have to use your rag. And we use our rag in two ways. So the first way is when you wash out your brush in order to do a new mix, you have to wipe the brush on your rag. Not a lot, but just a little. And after you've made your mix, before you touch that paper, just dab your brush on your rag. And then you're getting rid of the excess water. And that is critical because first we're going to do this background wash. Then we're going to paint these clouds on. And what you've got to be careful about is if the paper underneath this paint is dry, well, not dry, but like moist, and your brush is very wet, then you're going to get a cauliflower. When you touch this paint, it's basically your new paint mix is going to explode. It's just going to go and give you a really ugly cauliflower. But if you dab your brush on your rag, you're getting rid of excess water. Also, you need a thick mix. That's very important. Then you dab your brush on the rag, and then you should wait a little for this paint underneath to dry a little. Not too much, but a little. And then what you do, and this is so critical, is just touch it. Just a little dab. And then see what happens, because if the paint just spreads out very quickly, whoa, hold your horses and wait for a while. But if it hardly moves, but you get this soft edge, then you're good to go. But do remember this final point. The paper is tilted. It's tilted, yeah? And what this means is the paint is running down. And so basically you've got this line of water running down. So the water is leaving the top part of the paper quickly. And so this top part's going to dry quickly. And the bottom is going to stay wet the longest time. So you want to paint these top clouds first, because if you leave it too long, then it's going to be dry here. Okay? So at least that's the way I do it. If you prefer another way, that's fine. And just to let you know, I did cheat. That was not the first painting. So here's my first painting on multimedia paper. Not too bad, right, for multimedia paper. And as you can see, I changed the composition. So I did change things. And here's another one, my second one. This is a much better composition, I think. And I think this was when I realized, hey, I've got a good painting here. I was really happy with this one. And then I did this one. Now this one is good because these clouds are painted on after the paint dried. So let's have a look at this. Okay, so if you look at the top one, that's wet in wet, the clouds. And the bottom one, wet on dry. I did soften those clouds as well, so they're not completely wet on dry. I did soften them a little, but as you can see, the wet in wet technique is just, it's just more beautiful, isn't it? Look at those clouds above. Look at the softness of them. Now look at the clouds below. They do look a little bit ugly, don't they? And you get that transparency thing happening. But that's probably because of the colours underneath being too strong. So it's not really fair to say that. So this is why we're doing wet in wet, because look at that. Those clouds look so beautiful and wispy, don't they? And we'd like to paint clouds like that, right? Okay, and finally, this is the real big one. I think I'll throw this painting away. I don't know what to do with it. But I had to go on a big size. And it's basically the same thing. First I did this light red, then this yellow, then this orange, and then I did the blue and had it come down. It was tilted and I had it come down. And then the first thing I did was this here, and then the risky bit, the scary bit, doing these clouds. And like I said, you need to use your rag and you need to get rid of excess water and just touch the paper. First of all, you wait a little for it to dry a little, to become moist, not wet. And then you just touch it a little with your brush. And if it doesn't explode, then it's good to go. So anyway, sorry for the talk, but I just hope it helps you with this technique, because it's so fun. And if you do screw up, if it does go wrong, which there's a high chance it will do, then just persevere, because with practice, you'll get there. And I know this sounds like a lie, but the truth is, with time, you'll actually enjoy doing this technique, because it's quite, at first it's just scary, but eventually, you know, that scariness becomes exciting. Not always, but sometimes it becomes exciting. And when you actually master it, it's a lot of fun. And well, you just feel so good about yourself. So let's begin and have some fun. So I've got my brush and I'm using a mop and I'm just wetting the paper. Now my water is a bit discoloured, but that's okay, we should be all right. Then I'm going to do my alizarin crimson here. Maybe a bit more. And then below this I'm going to do yellow. So cerulean yellow. I don't even know how to pronounce it. So I'm very careful not to use a lot of yellow, because if this yellow touches blue, it will go green. And then below this, some red again, pure red. So one of the nice things about this is just using pure colours at the moment. But this is drying out pretty quick, so I've got to hurry up a bit more. So quickly I'm going to do the top. I guess I could just wet this like this for now. Then down here I want to add some orange. So this is brilliant orange, and once again just pure orange. At the moment you don't have to worry too much about the amount of water on your brush, but of course it's not soaking with water, it's not dripping. Okay, so now I'm going to do the top, and I'm using cerulean blue. And remember, the top dries the quickest, so you have to keep the top wet, but not dripping wet so that paint's running down and spoiling what's below. And then slowly I'm going to join this to the red bit, and look at that, isn't that just beautiful? This is so therapeutic, doing this, and it's going to make you really good at mixing your paints and controlling the amount of water. Now the next thing is some phthalo blue. So I put my brush in the water on the rag so it's not too wet. That's so important. Then I get some of this stronger phthalo blue, and again on the rag. That's so critical. And now look what's happening here. I've got splashing. So let's not panic. Just try and blend that in. It doesn't have to be perfectly blended. If you have bits like that, then that actually looks quite good. So I don't want to do it perfectly. Then the next thing is, I can see this is drying out and becoming a hard line. So I don't want that to happen. So quickly, cerulean blue. And then some red. Too much, wash out my brush, wipe it. That wiping is critical. And I want it to be a kind of lilac colour. Ah, that will do. And then here I'm going to do some blue coming up. It's going to be dusky, a dusky sky. That's something I should have said right at the beginning. Maybe I will when I do an introduction for this video. Okay, so it's drying out very quickly now. So I want to do some clouds. So I want them to be quite blue. So what you do is just dab the paper and you just are checking. And I'm covering these splatters. You see that? And I'm doing like these sweeping clouds. Now as I go down, I'm finding that the paper is wetter. So I have to be aware of that. The higher I go up, the drier it will be. So if my brush has a lot of water on it and I put a mark here, I'm going to get an ugly cauliflower. It basically means the water from my brush will spread out like a mini tsunami. But it will spread out and it will end up leaving an ugly mark where the water stops. So this is the thing. My brush is moist, but not dry, but quite moist. My mix is there fairly thick, and you just want to dab it and look what happens to it. If it starts to explode, then it's too wet. If it's a dry mark, then you've left it too long and probably need to start again. So I'm careful not to go back up there anymore. Now can you see how this red underneath has created this lovely light kind of wispy clouds with a touch of warmth in them? Now I'm painting this in the morning, and I just recommend that you become a bit of an early riser, and before you do anything you just go and paint a picture. It's so nice to just create something. The feeling you get is just amazing. So okay, and now I just want to do a bottom here, but I also want to leave a gap for water. So what I'm going to do is a purplish kind of mix. Red, some blue, maybe some phthalo blue. So I've done this with very few colours. you don't need a lot of colours to make a nice painting, and it's just going to confuse you, especially at first. I need to make this a bit redder. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I guess it's the same as the sky, and maybe that's okay. Let's try it. I've painted this picture a few times, but the truth is, each time I paint it, it always ends up being a little different. And I think I've just got to go along with that. And this is going to be water here. Yeah, I just managed to leave enough space for water. And what we're going to do now is just let that dry. Now we've done the sky, and we're going to do a simple background. So I'm going to use my bamboo brush, and basically I'm going to use something like cerulean blue and a touch of burnt umber, just a touch, because maybe it looks a bit too blue. And it's going to come about here. And then slowly it's going to curve around like that. And maybe I need a bigger brush, and I need phthalo blue, burnt umber, then let's try this. And then back to my bamboo brush, and we're just going to do these kind of strokes using the side of the brush and flicking up, just to create a feeling of foliage, trees and bushes and things like that. There we go. And then it gets bluer as we come around here. Okay. And I wanted it to actually be a lot lower. Here. And then I'm just going to go for pure blue again. Well, fairly blue. And here I'm going to indicate some masts. So we've got some boats here, and here are the masts. Just a slight indication. And try and get a little bit of a dry brushy mark here if you can. And then there's this not exactly boardwalk, because it's not boards, but there's this path by the sea, and I'm going to paint that. I'm going to have it all joined together. Let's just spray to add some texture, and I might just add, because it all looks a little bit boring, I might just add a palm tree here. So basically you begin here and you just flick out, just like that, and maybe one more here, and dry your brush, and then there's more chance of, well, not quite so wet. Not so happy with that one. But it's good enough. It does the job. And now my next worry is this bit here and how to make this look good. I think I'm just going to continue it down. So now this is just basically guesswork. I'm going to continue it down to the beach, or to the sea, sorry. This is the beach. And we can do some dry brush a bit there. That looks quite nice. Oh yeah, I like that. And we could just leave it like that. That would be good enough. But I'm going to do a bit more. So I could colour this lightly in a yellow colour, but I'm just going to leave it white just to keep the whole painting really simple, so that when you do this you can do it very quickly. Now I'm just making a strong mix, cerulean blue, burnt umber and a touch of red. That's my, well, I was going to say that's the mix I normally use for making darks, but actually it's phthalo blue, burnt umber, alizarin. But this time I'm using cerulean, I think. Yeah. Which means it's not quite so strong. Okay, here we go then. Dry my brush. So please remember that. And then just a few strokes across. Just a few. And then we create that effect of water. Okay, there we go. And we just need to leave that to dry. Maybe one more spray. The final thing I want to do is this walkway, which is elevated and has a wall here. So this for me is the part of the painting that still I'm not so happy about. For some reason I can't quite get it right, but it doesn't really matter because this video is really about painting a sky wet in wet. This is just a kind of bonus bit, if you like, how we can finish it off and make a nice scene. So I'm doing a strong colour here using phthalo blue, alizarin and burnt umber, but it's a bit too blue, a bit too strong at the moment. There we go. Now I think if I can make this dry brush, so I'm using my rag a lot, it's going to blend in better than if I just paint it straight on. So here we go. The tricky thing is to do a dry brush line that is actually curving, and it's going to get quite faint there. And of course, because of perspective, it's going to start off very wide and then it's going to become more and more narrow. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, that's not too bad. Oh, so that seems to have worked fairly well. And then I think if we have maybe a few touches coming out like this, and then I think that's actually not too bad. It fits in. If I hadn't done the dry brush, then it wouldn't have worked. So you are learning about dry brush technique here as well. Okay, now I'm going to do the palm trees. So I'm going to start off with the easy ones, which are just cerulean blue, and a touch of burnt umber. And really they're going to be darker than this, but I'm just kind of exaggerating them a bit. So they're going to begin about here. Just look at my picture, maybe one here. And it's useful to use your finger to blend things in. And I'm having to think about perspective. Like they need to get bigger and they'll get further apart. And I might add a touch of burnt umber to this just to give it a bit more strength, which is adding to the feeling of perspective. Things becoming closer, they're stronger in intensity, and they're bigger. And then just blend that in with my finger. Finger is so useful. And that looks quite nice, doesn't it? In fact, that looks really nice. And then one more here. Starting to get a bit worried now because I don't want to muck it up. So more intense. This one's going to be about here. Now that's sad because that's going to overlap and we don't really want that. So maybe if I make it here, and then let's dry my brush. So I'm drying my brush a lot. You see how this is getting more intense? More burnt umber, more phthalo blue, and then that's going to start going a bit more of a greeny colour. So I hope you can see this. Yeah, and that's nice. And if I can get a bit of a dry brush effect there, that would be nice. And then just soften this off. It's maybe a bit too thick at the bottom there. And then maybe just one more here. Just suggest it. That would be a nice introduction to the painting. Say about here. And then that can be a bit scary sometimes, doing these really bold things like this. All I can say is practice on multimedia paper these basic designs, and then when you feel like you've got a little bit of confidence, then have a go on your final paper. And if it goes wrong, don't give yourself a hard time, because it's just part of the process, I'm afraid. It's a lot of failure. I've painted this picture, maybe now this is the 5th or 6th time. So, and I've been painting for 20 years. Doesn't mean you can't do it straight off the bat, but I just want to give you an idea of like how much you are going to fail, so you don't get upset about that. Also, when you copy other artists' work, it's so much easier, because a lot of the problems, they've sorted them out for you, and there's nothing wrong with that. When I was a beginner, I often copied other artists' work, well, all the time actually, and it's a great way to learn. It's I think the best way to learn, and then gradually, bit by bit, you develop over years your own style, ideas, and your own way of doing stuff. But at first, copying is so useful. You're going to get better much quicker. Yeah, I put him too close. I did that in my other paintings with these figures. I put them too close to this wall. So let's add some more over here. Now I'm just doing the tops because I want to really do dry brush effect for the lower part of these figures. And here just indicating them. Like that. And it makes me think maybe I should have done this wall a bit stronger, so I might strengthen that in a minute. And now I'm just using my finger. You have to be careful about this. If it's too wet, you're going to make a mess of it. And your fingers get dirty, so you have to keep cleaning them. Otherwise you'll put the dirty paint back on the paper. But I just want to make these legs a little bit fainter because they're in motion, and so you don't want them too clear. Otherwise the figure's going to look a bit static, and we don't want that. Oh yeah, so I think that looks quite nice. I'm just going to strengthen this wall. Now I use my rag because I want to get a dry brush effect if possible. Yeah, and there we go. I think that's it. So I think that's quite a nice painting. Maybe I should have done this a bit darker, this thing here, and maybe I could have made the sky a little bit more glowing. But what I did there was an assessment, and it's always good to look at your work, and although it's a bit painful, just to be a bit honest with yourself and say, well, what looks good and what doesn't look good. So overall I'm happy with this. I'm just thinking, shall I add one more palm tree? Okay, let's go for it. One more palm tree. I've got to be careful though to make it the same kind of mostly blue paint that I used here. And actually I don't want it to get confused with these. Okay. Ooh, too much paint. Wipe my brush on my rag. And remember, it's got to be lower and it's got to be smaller. Like that. Yeah, and I think that worked. Okay. So, please have a go and just, maybe use my finger here and just blend that in a bit. And then this edge is a bit hard, so with my finger just soften it a bit and wipe it up a bit. So please have a go, and remember, just enjoy it. Enjoy the process, enjoy watercolor painting, and have fun. Yeah, I guess that's the same thing. Have fun, enjoy, and just remember, persevere. You will make great paintings if you just persevere and keep at it. It will happen. Bye for now.